They hung her on a tree. She's still alive. Please, you have to come right now. Please. The little girl's scream tore through the fog like a knife. Barefoot, bleeding, 7 years old and standing alone in the middle of the road, throwing herself in front of 4 black luxury cars that could have crushed her without slowing down. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Every man in that convoy froze, because children like this, screaming like this, in the dark like this, meant something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong in the world. Then the back door of the lead car opened. Ramon Ortega stepped out, and everything changed. If this story moves you, please subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The girl's name was Maria. She was 7 years old, and she had been running for 40 minutes through cold forest before she found the road. She hadn't known it was a road. She hadn't known much of anything by that point except that her mother had told her to run. Run and don't look back. Run until you find someone, anyone, and make them help. Those were the last words Elena Smith had spoken to her daughter before the men dragged her away into the dark between the trees. Run, baby. Don't stop. Don't look back. Find someone. Maria had looked back once. She wished she hadn't. She had been running ever since. When the headlights hit her, she threw her arms up the way her mother had taught her. Make yourself big. Make yourself seen. And she screamed. She screamed everything she had left in her lungs. And she did not move from the middle of that road, even as the first car in the convoy braked hard enough to leave rubber on the asphalt. Even as she heard doors flying open and men shouting. Even as the flashlights found her face and she had to squint against the white glare. Get her out of the road, someone barked. Don't touch me, Maria screamed. Not until you help my mom. They hung her on a tree. She's still alive. She was still moving. Please, you have to come right now, please. Whose kid is this? No idea. Check the tree line. I said, don't touch me. She slapped a hand away from her shoulder, hard, and the man who'd reached for her actually stepped back. A 7-year-old girl covered in dirt and blood and pine needles, and she made a grown man in a black suit step back. That was when the rear door of the third car opened. Ramon Ortega did not rush. He never rushed. That was one of the first things people noticed about him. The stillness, the deliberate pace of a man who had never once in his adult life been afraid of what he might find when he turned a corner. He was broad-shouldered and dark-suited, his white dress shirt open at the collar despite the cold, the black tattoo that crawled up the right side of his neck, catching the light as he stepped forward through the cluster of his own men, who parted for him the way water parts around a stone. He stopped 6 feet from the girl. He looked at her. She looked back at him, really looked, the way scared children look at strangers, cataloging, calculating whether this one was safe. He crouched down until he was at her height. Tell me what happened, he said. His voice was low, not gentle exactly. Ramon Ortega had never been described as gentle in his life, but level, even, the voice of a man who was genuinely asking. Maria's chin trembled. They tied her up to a tree. Her hands were above her head and she couldn't breathe right. She was making this sound. Her voice broke. She pressed her fists against her eyes. She told me to run. I didn't want to go, but she kept saying, run, Maria, run. So I ran. But she was still moving. She was still alive. I know she was. Please. Ramon studied her face for 3 seconds. Then he stood up. Dante. One of his men appeared at his shoulder immediately. How many vehicles do we have with bolt cutters? Car 2, possibly car 4. Get them. We're going into the trees. He looked down at Maria again. You're going to show us exactly where. Can you do that? She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, leaving a streak of mud across her cheek. Yes. Good girl. He turned to the convoy. Everyone out. Leave the drivers. Nobody questioned it. That was the other thing people noticed about Ramon. Not just the stillness, but the way a room, or in this case a road, reorganized itself around his decisions without any argument, without any negotiation. 14 men climbed out of 4 vehicles. Flashlights came on. And Maria Smith, 7 years old and barefoot in November, turned and walked back into the forest with the most feared man in the state following close behind her. The forest was dense and black between the trunks, and the fog had come back down since Maria had run through the first time, thicker now, swallowing the flashlight beams at 30 feet. She moved fast. She knew the way. Children always know the way back to the last place they saw their mother. It's wired into them at a level deeper than thought. And she ducked under branches and hopped over roots without slowing. And Ramon matched her pace without complaint, his men fanning out through the trees on either side. "How far?" he asked once. "Not far, maybe 5 more minutes." "Did you see how many men there were?" She thought. 4, maybe 5. One of them had a red jacket. She paused. One of them was really big. He was the one who grabbed her. Ramon filed this away without comment. Behind him, he heard Dante murmur something into a phone. Good. Dante was already working the problem from the outside, pulling up property records, access roads, anything that might tell them who owned land out here, and whether any of those names matched anything in Ramon's considerable mental inventory of enemies and associates. There, Maria stopped so suddenly that Ramon nearly walked into her. She pointed. The oak tree was massive, 3 feet of trunk, branches spreading 40 feet in every direction, the kind of tree that had been standing since before any of them were born. And tied to it, arms stretched above her head and secured to a low branch with what looked like electrical cord, was a woman. She was alive. Barely. Her head had dropped forward, her knees were partially buckled, and she was breathing in the shallow, labored way of someone who had been in that position long enough for their body to start giving out. But her chest was moving, her fingers were still flexing, unconsciously, the hands of a person still fighting, still holding on. "Mom!" Maria surged forward, but Ramon caught her by the shoulder, gently but firmly. "In a second," he said. "Dante, bolt cutters. Marco, check the perimeter, 30-foot radius, now." He walked toward the tree himself, scanning the ground as he moved, reading the earth the way a man reads a page, picking up information from every bent branch and boot print. Whoever had done this had not been subtle. There were at least 4 sets of tracks. They'd come in from the northwest. They hadn't bothered to conceal anything. The cigarette butts on the ground, the tire tracks visible even through the brush about 100 yards deeper in, told him these men hadn't expected anyone to find her out here. That told him something important. It meant they hadn't known about the road. They'd picked this spot thinking it was isolated. They'd been careless. He reached Elena Smith and put 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, thin and fast, but there. Her face was bruised on the left side, and there was dried blood along her hairline. Her coat was torn at the shoulder. She'd fought them, hard. "She's alive," he said, not loudly, but Maria heard it, and made a sound that cut right through the cold air. Relief and grief mixed together in a way that was almost unbearable to hear. Dante arrived with the bolt cutters. The electrical cord was heavy gauge, but it gave on the second cut, and Elena Smith's weight shifted. Ramon caught her before she could fall, took her full weight against his chest, and lowered her to the ground with a care that made 2 of his men exchange a glance. They were wise enough not to let him see. "Mom! Mom, it's me, I'm here!" Maria was on her knees beside her mother before anyone could stop her, her small hands pressing against Elena's face, her voice cracking between desperation and prayer. "Wake up! Please wake up! I found help, Mom. I found someone. Please." Elena's eyes opened. They were brown, and they were terrified, and for a moment she looked at nothing, saw nothing, her body still caught in whatever nightmare the last few hours had been. Then her eyes found Maria's face, and something in her expression cracked completely open. "Baby," she whispered. Baby, I'm here. I'm okay. I ran like you told me. Maria took her mother's hand in both of hers and held it against her chest. I ran and I found help. Elena's eyes moved up, found Ramon crouching above them, her whole body tensed. Easy, Ramon said. I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe. She stared at him, the tattoo on his neck, the suit, the ring of men with flashlights standing in the fog behind him. None of it read as safe, and Elena Smith was not a stupid woman. Her eyes were already calculating, already working the angles, even through the pain. Who are you? She managed. Nobody you need to worry about right now. He turned to Dante. Where's the nearest car? Northwest, maybe 200 meters. We can bring it closer. Do it. And get Dr. Vega on the phone. I want him at the Linden house in 40 minutes. He looked back at Elena. Can you move your legs? She tried, winced. Yes, I think so. Good. We're going to get you out of here. Why? The word came out sharp, suspicious, and Ramon paused. He actually paused, which was not something he did often, and he looked at her with something that might, in another man, have been called respect. Because your daughter asked me to, he said. Elena Smith looked at her daughter. Maria was still holding her hand, still watching her mother's face with the focused intensity of a child who has decided that if she looks hard enough, she can hold the world together by sheer force of will. Elena looked back at Ramon. Okay, she said. They got her out of the forest and into the back of the lead car, and Maria climbed in beside her and refused, with a quiet ferocity that no one argued with, to let go of her mother's hand for a single second. Ramon sat in the front. He made 4 phone calls in the 20 minutes it took to reach the Linden house, and he spoke on each one with the clipped efficiency of a man who is accustomed to complex problems and the swift elimination of them. The Linden house was a property that technically belonged to a shell company that technically belonged to another company, and the net result was that no one who mattered knew it existed. It was clean, well-stocked, and sat on 12 acres behind an iron gate. Dr. Vega, a compact, quiet man with steady hands and no curiosity about the circumstances of his patients, arrived in 38 minutes and spent the next hour with Elena, while Maria sat outside the door, and Ramon sat across the hallway in a wooden chair that was too small for him, watching the girl. She hadn't cried since the forest. She'd used everything up in there, wrung herself dry, and what was left was this, the fierce, exhausted stillness of a child running on empty, but refusing to collapse. He'd seen that look before. Not on a child, but he'd seen it. You did good tonight, he said. Maria looked at him. I didn't do anything. I just ran. Running was everything, he said. If you hadn't run, if you hadn't stopped my car, she'd be dead by morning. He said it plainly, without softening it, because she was the kind of kid who would know if you were softening things, and she deserved better than that. You saved her life. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then, are you a bad man? The hallway felt very still. Ramon considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I've done bad things, he said. Whether that makes me a bad man depends on who you ask. Are you going to do bad things to us? No. Why not? He looked at her. Because you stopped my car in the middle of the road in the dark, and you weren't scared enough of me to move. And because your mother didn't break. He paused. People like that, I don't hurt them. Maria considered this. Who do you hurt? People who hurt people like you. She looked at him for a long time after that, weighing it, processing it the way children process things that don't fit into the categories they already have. Then she said, okay, and went back to watching the door. Dante appeared at the end of the hallway and tilted his head. Ramon rose and walked to him, putting distance between himself and the girl. We pulled the tracks, Dante said quietly. The tire impressions from the vehicle in the woods match a type used exclusively by 2 dealers in the county. One of them runs product for Castellano. Ramon's jaw tightened slightly. Castellano. The men who did this were his. We're not sure if Elena was a target or if she was in the wrong place. Either way, she's in his sights now. Ramon thought for a moment. Where is he tonight? His club. Downtown. He'll be there until 2. Ramon looked at his watch. It was 11:40. Send Torres and Wick to the cabin northwest of the drop site. Those footprints led somewhere, and whoever these men are, they haven't had time to move far. I want them picked up quietly. No noise. He glanced back down the hall at Maria, who was still watching the door with her small fists in her lap. And I want it done clean. No collateral. Understood. And Castellano? I'll handle Castellano myself. Dante nodded and disappeared. Ramon walked back to his chair in the hallway and sat down. A few minutes passed. Then the door opened and Dr. Vega came out, snapping his bag shut. She's stable. Bruising to the ribs, soft tissue damage in the wrists and shoulders. No fractures. No internal bleeding that I can determine. He lowered his voice. She was up there long enough to cause some numbness in the hands. It'll pass, but she needs rest. Real rest. A week minimum. She'll have it. The doctor nodded and left without asking anything else. Maria was already on her feet before Ramon could move, pushing past him through the doorway. He heard Elena's voice, weak but immediate, full, and the sound of them holding each other, and he stood in the hallway outside the open door and did not go in. Dante called again. We found them. The cabin, like you said. 5 men. Castellano's crew, confirmed. 2 of them are in his books going back 4 years. Hold them there. I'm coming. He straightened his jacket, fixed his cuffs, looked one last time through the open door at the woman in the bed, and the girl folded over her like she was trying to hold her together with her own body. Then he walked out into the night. The cabin was 12 minutes from the Linden house by car, and Ramon spent 11 of those 12 minutes in silence, looking out the window at nothing, thinking about a promise he'd made a long time ago, in a different life, to a different version of himself. He kept making versions of that promise, it seemed, kept finding new reasons to make it. He had not told anyone about his sister in years. He was not about to start tonight. The 12th minute ended, the car stopped. He got out. The cabin was small and poorly lit, a single yellow bulb burning through a greasy window, and from 30 feet away he could already hear raised voices inside. Castellano's men, nervous, arguing, the kind of noise that men make when they know something has gone wrong, but don't yet know how wrong. He knocked on the door. Once. The voices stopped. He knocked again. The door opened 4 inches, a thick face peering out through the crack. Ramon looked at the face. The face looked back at him. He watched the exact moment the man recognized him, watched the color drain, watched the eyes go wide. Open the door, Ramon said. The door opened. He walked in. There were 5 of them, like Dante had said, and the room was small and warm and smelled of cigarettes and cheap beer, and they arranged themselves against the walls and furniture in the unconscious geometry of men who are calculating exits. And Ramon stood in the center of the room in his dark suit with his hands loose at his sides, and he looked at each of them in turn. Which one of you, he said very calmly, tied the woman to the tree? Silence. Then, we were following orders. A voice from the corner. A large man in a red jacket. Ramon looked at him for a long moment. I know, he said. Tell me about the orders. The man in the red jacket had a name. It was Hector. He was 34 years old, broad across the shoulders, with hands that looked like they'd been built for breaking things. He did not look afraid of Ramon Ortega. That, in Ramon's experience, was always a mistake. Victor Castellano gave the order, Hector said. He said it with the flat confidence of a man who believes that naming a bigger predator will protect him from the ones standing in front of him. We don't question Castellano. That's not how it works. I know how it works, Ramon said. He pulled a chair from the table and sat down on it backwards, arms folded across the top of the back, completely relaxed. completely still. What I'm asking is why she was targeted, the woman, Elena Smith. He let the name sit in the room. What did she do? Hector glanced at the others, a flicker, quick, involuntary, and Ramon caught it. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see, said a second man, smaller, wiry, standing near the window. He had the twitchy energy of someone who talks when he's scared. That's all we were told. She was in the wrong place. Castellano wanted it handled. Handled, Ramon repeated. You hung a woman from a tree in November and left her to die, and that's the word you're using. Handled. We weren't going to leave her forever, the wiry man said quickly. Someone was supposed to come back. Shut up, Luis. Hector's voice cracked like a whip. Luis shut up. But the damage was done, and everyone in the room knew it. Ramon looked at Luis with the calm, patient attention of a man who has just been handed exactly what he needed. Someone was coming back, Ramon said. When? Luis looked at Hector. Hector stared at the floor. The silence stretched out, and Ramon let it stretch, because silence was a tool like any other, and he had always known how to use it. Dawn, Luis finally said. Someone was coming back at dawn to finish it. The room shifted. Two of the other men moved almost imperceptibly toward the walls, like they were trying to put distance between themselves and the words that had just been said. Even Hector's jaw tightened. Ramon stood up from the chair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She has a 7-year-old daughter. Did Castellano's order include the child? Nobody answered. Did it include the child? He said it again, and this time there was something in his voice that was not anger exactly. It was quieter than anger and much more dangerous. We didn't touch the kid, Hector said. She ran before we could. He stopped himself, but it was already out. Ramon looked at him for a long count of 5. Before you could, he said softly. All right, Hector. He turned to Dante, who was standing near the door. Get their phones, every device in this room, and get me anything they have on Castellano's current operation. Locations, schedule, contacts, all of it. He turned back to the 5 men. You're going to cooperate with that, fully, because the alternative involves me leaving this room and not coming back, and then it becomes a conversation with men who are considerably less patient than I am. He buttoned his jacket. Understood? 4 of them nodded immediately. Hector was a half-second behind, but he nodded too. Dante moved through the room with 2 others, methodical and efficient. Ramon stepped outside. The cold hit him the moment he cleared the doorway. He stood in it for a moment, looking up through the bare branches at the night sky, breathing slowly. His hands, he noticed, were not entirely steady. He pressed them flat against his thighs and made them still. He thought about Dawn. He thought about Elena Smith still tied to that tree at dawn, a 7-year-old girl alone in the forest with her mother's body. He pressed the thought down, filed it away. There was no use for it here. Dante came out 3 minutes later. Phones pulled. 2 of them had direct message threads with a contact saved as V, which matches Castellano's operational pattern. The last message tonight was sent at 9:42. It said, done. Confirm morning pickup. And the reply? Confirmed. Clean. Ramon's eyes stayed on the sky. Clean. He exhaled. Call Torres. I want 2 men on the cabin around the clock until I say otherwise. Nobody leaves. Nobody makes contact. He started walking back toward the car. And get me everything we have on Castellano's location for the next 24 hours. Property records, his regular contacts, whoever he's been meeting with this week. Already pulling it. Ramon! Dante kept pace beside him. This is going to accelerate things. If we move on Castellano directly, his organization will respond. He has 30, maybe 40 men. I know how many men he has. I'm just saying, the timing is what it is. Ramon reached the car and stopped with his hand on the door. He turned to look at Dante, really look at him, the way he rarely did. Dante, a woman almost died tonight because she saw something. A little girl ran barefoot through a forest in the dark because her mother told her to run. Castellano didn't hesitate when he gave that order, and he won't hesitate to finish it once he finds out she's alive. He opened the door. The timing is now. Dante nodded, said nothing, got in the car. They drove back toward the city. Elena was awake when Ramon returned to the Linden house. That surprised him. Dr. Vega had left strict instructions about rest, and he'd assumed, based on what she'd been through, that she would be unconscious for hours. But Elena Smith, it was becoming clear, did not follow instructions particularly well. She was sitting up in bed, and Maria was asleep beside her, curled against her mother's hip with one fist tucked under her chin. And Elena had her arm wrapped around her daughter and her eyes fixed on the doorway, waiting. Ramon stopped in the doorway. "I heard the car," Elena said. Her voice was rough, damaged at the edges, but the clarity behind it was sharp. "Was it them? The men who—" "We found them, yes." She let out a breath that had clearly been held for some time. "Are they? They won't come near you again." She studied his face, looking for the shape of what he meant by that. He let her look. He didn't clarify, and she didn't ask him to. "What did I see?" he asked. She blinked. "What?" "The men told me you were targeted because you saw something. Something you weren't supposed to see." He came a step into the room. "What did you see, Elena?" She looked down at Maria's sleeping face for a moment. Her hand moved over her daughter's hair. A gesture so habitual and automatic, it was clearly something she'd done 10,000 times. A physical reflex of love. Then she looked back up at him. "3 weeks ago," she said, "I was working late. I clean offices, commercial buildings, downtown. The Alderan building, you know it?" He knew it. "Go on." "I was on the 14th floor, supposed to be empty, but there was a light under one of the conference room doors, and I heard voices, and when I pushed the door open to check—" She stopped, swallowed. "There were 4 men standing around a table covered in papers, and one of them was Victor Castellano. I've seen his picture in the news." She looked at Ramon steadily, and one of the other men was a federal judge, Judge Warren Alcott. The room was very quiet. Ramon absorbed this without any visible reaction, which required more discipline than he would have admitted. Warren Alcott. He turned the name over in his mind, examining it from every angle. Federal judge, 8 years on the bench, known for being aggressively anti-organized crime. The kind of judge who handed down sentences that made the evening news. The kind of judge no one would ever suspect of sitting at a table with Victor Castellano. "Did they see you?" he asked. "I backed out of the doorway. I don't know if they saw my face. I thought—" She shook her head. "I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't him. I told myself I was wrong. I went home. I didn't say anything. I tried to forget it." A short, humorless sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Apparently, someone didn't want to wait and find out whether I'd stay quiet. Ramon was quiet for a moment. Then, "You should have gone to the police. My daughter is 7 years old, and I'm a cleaning woman who can barely make rent," she said evenly. "Who was going to believe me? And even if they did, who was going to protect us?" She held his gaze. No one was going to protect us. He had no argument for that. It was simply true. "Did you tell anyone else what you saw? Anyone at all?" "No one." "You're sure?" "My entire world is Maria." She said it with the directness of a woman stating a fact about gravity. "I don't have anyone I would tell something like that." He believed her. "Okay," he straightened. "You're going to stay here, both of you. Don't use your phone. I'm going to have one of my men bring you a clean one. Don't call anyone you know, not your employer, not anyone, until I say it's safe. Do you understand?" "For how long?" "Until this is over." Elena looked at him. What does over mean exactly? With men like Castellano, things don't just— "I'll handle Castellano." "And the judge?" Ramon paused. That was the sharper edge of it, and she'd found it immediately. Castellano was manageable, a crime boss, a known quantity, a man whose entire operation could be mapped and dismantled given sufficient motivation. But a sitting federal judge was a different problem altogether. A federal judge with a secret was either an asset or a liability, and right now Warren Alcott was both, and the question of what to do about that was going to require careful thought. "One thing at a time," he said. Elena looked at him for another moment. Then she nodded, slowly, and pulled Maria slightly closer. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I'm nobody to you. Maria stopped your car, that's all. You could have driven around her. You could have kept going." Ramon was quiet for a beat. "Could I have? Most men would have." "I'm not most men." She almost said something to that. He could see the response form and then dissolve behind her eyes. What she said instead was quieter, more tired. "I know, I can tell." She looked down at Maria again. "She trusts you. She doesn't trust easily. She hasn't since her father left." She glanced up. "That means something." It did mean something. He didn't say so. He said, "Get some sleep," and he left. He was in the kitchen when Dante found him at 2 a.m, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand. Castellano's at his club. He'll close out around 2:30, go home through his usual route. We have a window. Dante laid a printed sheet on the counter. A map, timestamps, notated in Dante's precise handwriting. "But Ramon, there's more." Ramon looked at him. "I had someone pull the Alderan building tenant records tonight. The conference room where Elena says she saw Castellano, it's registered to a holding company. The holding company traces back through 4 layers of incorporation." He paused. "The final layer is a trust administered out of Nevada. The trustee of record is a man named Gerald Finch." "I don't know that name." "You wouldn't. He's clean on paper. But Gerald Finch is Warren Alcott's brother-in-law." The cold coffee sat untouched. So it wasn't a coincidence that Elena had seen them in that building. It was Castellano's building. His meeting, on his territory. And Judge Alcott had been there willingly, meeting in a space controlled by the man he was supposedly in the business of sending to prison. The scope of it settled over the room like weather. "How long?" Ramon asked. "How long has Alcott been dirty?" "Based on what I'm looking at, the trust was established 6 years ago, maybe longer. 6 years. 6 years of verdicts, sentences, rulings. 6 years of Castellano's enemies going to prison on federal charges while Castellano walked. 6 years of the whole machine running perfectly, invisibly, right in front of everyone. And Elena Smith had walked through the wrong door on the wrong night and seen the engine room. "She's not just a witness to a meeting," Ramon said. It wasn't a question. "No," Dante said. "She's the only person outside the arrangement who can put those 2 men in the same room. If she testifies, if there's ever an investigation, she becomes the key." She's already the key. Castellano knows it. That's why he didn't just scare her off. He wanted her dead. Ramon set down the coffee cup. "And Alcott?" "Alcott would have known too. He would have been told. Which means Alcott signed off on it." Ramon turned to look at the hallway, toward the back of the house where a woman and her daughter were sleeping. "A federal judge ordered a cleaning woman killed to protect himself." Dante said nothing. There was nothing to say. Ramon picked up his jacket from the back of a chair. He put it on. He straightened the collar, adjusted the cuffs, ran a hand through his hair. "Get the car," he said. "You're going tonight? To Castellano?" "I'm going to send him a message. Not the kind that requires an explanation afterward." He looked at Dante. "I want it clean, and I want it loud enough that every man in his organization understands what happened and why. Castellano needs to know that Elena Smith is under my protection personally. Not the organization, me, my name on it." Dante absorbed this. "That escalates everything. Once you put your name on it, I know. Castellano won't back down quietly. I know." Ramon's voice was final. Done. Get the car. Dante went. Ramon stood alone in the kitchen for a moment. He looked out the dark window. He thought about a girl running through a forest in the dark, barefoot, screaming at the headlights of a stranger's car because it was her last chance, and she took it without hesitation. He thought about what it means to be the only thing standing between a person and the worst outcome. He thought about a promise, old and worn and still holding. He turned off the kitchen light. He walked out of the house. And somewhere in the city, Victor Castellano was finishing his second drink of the night, completely unaware that the most consequential mistake of his life had already been made. 3 weeks ago, when a cleaning woman pushed open the wrong door, and tonight, when his men failed to find her daughter in the dark. The drive took 20 minutes. Ramon spent them in silence. Dante knew better than to fill it. They found Castellano's car at the curb outside the club, a black town car idling, his driver reading something on a phone. 2 men on the door. Standard arrangement. Ramon had seen it a dozen times. Castellano was predictable in his routines, which was both a comfort and a flaw. Stay here, Ramon told Dante. Ramon, stay here. He got out of the car alone. The 2 men on the door saw him coming. He watched the recognition hit them, the same draining of color, the same micro-adjustment of the body that he'd seen from Hector in the cabin. Fear dressed up as professional composure. I need 5 minutes with your employer, Ramon said. Tell him Ramon Ortega is outside. Tell him it's a courtesy call. The men looked at each other. One of them went inside. Ramon waited, unhurried. The cold didn't seem to touch him. 2 minutes later, the door opened. A different man, older, well-dressed, gray at the temples, holding a glass of something amber, stepped out onto the sidewalk and regarded Ramon with the careful neutrality of a man who is very frightened and working very hard not to show it. Victor Castellano was not what most people expected. He was not loud or broad or visibly brutal. He was thin and precise and spoke in the measured cadences of someone who had learned, long ago, that the most dangerous thing you can be is the person in the room who seems the least dangerous. Ramon, he said, this is unexpected. It shouldn't be, Ramon said. You know why I'm here. Castellano's glass rotated slowly between his fingers. I'm afraid I don't. Elena Smith, Ramon said, the woman your men left in the forest tonight, the one your men were planning to finish at dawn. A pause, fractional, barely visible, but there. I don't know what you're referring to, Castellano said. Yes, you do. Ramon took 1 step closer. So let me be straightforward with you, Victor, out of professional respect. The woman is alive. She is in my care. Her daughter is with her. The men you sent are currently having a very detailed conversation with members of my organization about the full scope of your operational schedule, your contacts, your financial arrangements, and your relationship with a certain federal judge whose name I'm sure you recognize. He watched Castellano's face very carefully as he said this last part. Every word of that conversation is being documented. Castellano's expression did not break, but something behind it shifted, a tectonic movement, deep and slow and irrevocable. You're making a serious accusation. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm telling you what I know, and I'm telling you as clearly as I know how to say it, that Elena Smith and her daughter are under my protection. Personally, my name, not my organization, not a favor, not a negotiation, my name. He held the man's gaze. If anything happens to them, if they develop so much as a headache, I will hold you responsible, and I will not be measured about it. The amber liquid in Castellano's glass had gone entirely still. You're choosing a cleaning woman, Castellano said slowly, over the kind of peace we've maintained for 4 years. I'm not choosing anyone over anything, Ramon said. I'm drawing a line. You're standing on the wrong side of it. He stepped back. Good night, Victor. He turned and walked back to the car. Behind him, he heard Castellano's voice, quiet, controlled, stripped of every performance. You have no idea what you've started. Ramon got in the car. Dante pulled away from the curb. Well, Dante said after a block. He knows, Ramon said. He knows she told me about Alcott. He looked out the window. He's going to move fast. We need to move faster. They moved faster. Ramon was back at the Linden house by 3 in the morning, and he did not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with Dante and 2 of his most trusted men, Marco and a quiet, methodical enforcer named Shaw, and they worked the problem the way Ramon always worked problems, from the outside in, identifying every pressure point, every vulnerability, every thread that could be pulled. Castellano will make contact with Alcott tonight, Ramon said. If he hasn't already, he'll tell him the woman is alive and that I'm involved. Alcott will panic. Federal judges always panic when the walls start closing because they've spent their careers watching other men panic in that exact position, and they always believed they were different, that they'd be smarter. They're never smarter. He looked at Marco. I need someone watching Alcott's residence starting now. I want to know the moment he makes a move. Car, phone call, anything. Done, Marco said, and left the table. Shaw slid a folder across the surface. Castellano's financials. The layers Dante pulled tonight, they go deeper than we thought. There are 3 separate accounts running through the Finch Trust, and 2 of them have transaction histories that line up with specific case outcomes in Alcott's court. We're not talking about occasional favors. This is systematic, structured payments timed to verdicts. Ramon opened the folder. His eyes moved down the columns of numbers with the practiced speed of a man who has spent 20 years reading financial arrangements that were designed to be unreadable. Alcott has been selling outcomes, he said, for at least 6 years, possibly 8. Every major organized crime prosecution in his district in that window. We'd need to audit them all, but based on what's here. Men went to prison, Ramon said. His voice was flat. Or didn't go to prison, based on whether Castellano paid. Yes. The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Ramon closed the folder. He thought about something he rarely allowed himself to think about. A trial, years ago, a man he had considered a close associate, sent away on federal charges that had always felt too clean, too perfectly assembled. That had been Alcott's court. He hadn't thought about it at the time. He thought about it now. Shaw, he said, I need you to find someone for me. Someone I can trust inside the federal system. Not law enforcement, not a lawyer. Someone who processes evidence. Someone whose job involves the physical handling of case files. He looked up. Someone who owes me a favor or can be made to owe me one. Because what Elena Smith saw, what these financial records show, that's not something I can walk into a police station with. The local system is too tangled. If Alcott has been running this operation for 8 years, I have to assume he has cover on at least some of the people I'd normally go to. Shaw nodded slowly. There's a woman, former county records clerk, moved to a federal administrative position about 3 years ago. You helped her brother out of a situation back in... I remember her, Ramon said. Get her name and number to Dante. Don't contact her directly yet. He stood up from the table. And nobody talks about Alcott outside this room. Not to anyone in the organization. Not to any of our contacts. If Castellano hears we have documentation on the judge, he'll burn everything he has on his end before we can use it. Understood. Ramon walked down the hall and stopped outside the door to the room where Elena and Maria were sleeping. It was cracked open an inch. Elena had left it that way, he understood instinctively, so she could hear if anyone moved through the house in the night. A mother's instinct. Keep the door open. Know what's coming. He didn't go in. He stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet, and then he went and sat in the chair in the hallway and closed his eyes. He didn't sleep, but he rested, which was the closest thing to sleep he usually permitted himself when something was unresolved. At 5:15 in the morning, Marco called. Alcott's on the move, Marco said. Left his house 20 minutes ago. Not his regular driver, a car I don't recognize. He's heading downtown. At 5 in the morning. He looked scared, Ramon. I could see it from the street. He came out of the house fast, no coat. His tie wasn't done right. Something shook him. Castellano called him. Ramon was already on his feet. Where is he going? Still tracking, but the route he's on, it goes toward the Alderan building. Ramon's eyes sharpened. Of course it does. His brother-in-law's building, his safe ground. He thought for 3 seconds. Don't lose him. Don't let him see you. Call me the moment he stops. He hung up. Walked back to the kitchen. Dante, get the car. Dante looked up from the table. Both of us? Just me and you. Shaw stays here. He looked at Shaw. Nothing happens to them. You understand me? Nothing. Shaw met his eyes. Nothing happens to them. The Alderan building was 22 stories of glass and steel in the kind of neighborhood that had been redeveloped twice in 20 years, each time washing out the people who'd been there before and replacing them with something more expensive and less human. At 5:40 in the morning, it was mostly dark, the lobby lit by the pale glow of overnight security lighting, and the street outside was empty except for Alcott's car parked crookedly at the curb in a way that confirmed what Marco had said. The man had arrived scared and in a hurry. Ramon told Dante to park half a block back. He's on 14, Ramon said, thinking aloud. That's where Elena saw them. That's where Castellano will have told him to go. Castellano's not there, though, Dante said. We've had eyes on Castellano since you left him outside the club. He went home. He doesn't need to be there. He just needed Alcott to go retrieve whatever they keep in that building. Document, records, anything that could connect them. He looked at the building. Alcott is up there right now destroying evidence. Dante said nothing. Which means we're running out of time, Ramon said. Once it's gone, Elena's testimony is the only thing left. Her word against 2 powerful men with no paper to back it up. He unbuckled his seatbelt. You're going in. I'm going in. Ramon, a federal judge, if he sees you, he's going to see me, Ramon said. That's the point. He got out of the car before Dante could finish the sentence. The lobby security guard was a young man who had been on shift since midnight and who looked up from his phone with the guilty expression of someone who had been watching something he shouldn't. Ramon put his ID on the counter, not the ID with his real name, the other one, the one that said he worked for a private security firm that technically existed on paper, and said, I have a meeting on 14. The judge is expecting me. He said it the way a man says something that is obviously true, and the security guard, young and tired and not paid enough to interrogate well-dressed men at 5 in the morning, buzzed him through. The elevator took 40 seconds. Ramon counted them. The 14th floor was lit by emergency lighting in the corridor, bright fluorescence visible under one door. The conference room, same one Elena had described. He walked to it without hurrying and pushed the door open. Warren Alcott was standing at the conference table with a leather bag open in front of him and papers spread across the surface, his hands moving with the frantic efficiency of a man who is dismantling his own life and knows it. He was 60 years old, silver-haired, the kind of face that appeared in newspaper photographs accepting civic awards. His jacket was off. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. He heard the door. He spun around. He stared at Ramon. His face went through 5 distinct stages in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, calculation, terror, and finally a settling into a mask of judicial authority that was the most practiced thing about him. You can't be here, Alcott said. This is private property. Whatever you think you... Sit down, Warren. The use of his first name hit the man like a slap. He didn't sit, but he stopped moving. Castellano called you tonight, Ramon said, stepping into the room. He told you I have Elena Smith. He told you she saw you here, in this room, 3 weeks ago. And now you're here trying to make sure that even if she talks, there's nothing to corroborate it. He looked at the papers on the table, contracts he could see, and what looked like ledger printouts, some already torn. How much have you already destroyed? Alcott's jaw worked. I have no idea what you're... The financial records are already off this building, Ramon said. Dante pulled digital copies 3 hours ago. Everything that traces the Finch Trust back to your arrangement with Castellano. Everything that maps to case outcomes in your courtroom over the last 6 years. He watched the judge's face carefully. I don't need what's on that table, Warren. I already have what I need. I came here to talk to you, not to stop you. That landed. He could see it land. The terrible calculus of a man realizing that the thing he came here to destroy was already irrelevant, that the net had already closed, that his frantic 5 a.m. drive had been for nothing. Alcott sat down. What do you want? He said. His voice had dropped all the way down to something raw and honest, stripped of every performance. It was the most authentic he'd probably sounded in years. I want you to understand your situation clearly, Ramon said. He pulled out a chair across the table and sat. Elena Smith is a problem for both of us. Not because she's dangerous, but because she's a liability that Castellano created. He tried to kill her. He failed. Now she's alive, she's credible, and she has a daughter who watched her mother get tied to a tree in a forest, which means there is a 7-year-old child who can corroborate the timeline, even if she doesn't understand what she saw. He paused. Your name doesn't have to be part of what happens next. That's your only opening, and it's closing fast. Alcott stared at him. You're asking me to? I'm asking you to think. Castellano's operation is coming down. That's not a threat, it's a forecast. I have documentation, I have witnesses, and I have every reason in the world to ensure that his organization does not survive the next 30 days. The only question is what goes down with it. Ramon looked him in the eye. You can be part of what falls, or you can be part of what cleans it up. Your choice, but you need to make it before Castellano decides that you're his next loose end. The word landed in the room like a stone in still water, and Alcott felt the ripples. Ramon watched the man's face shift as the implication settled, that Castellano, under pressure, with his operation exposed, would not hesitate to eliminate anyone who could speak about their arrangement. And who could speak about it more completely than the federal judge at the center of it? He'd never, Alcott started, then stopped. He left a woman hanging from a tree in November, Ramon said quietly. Think very carefully about what he would and wouldn't do. The silence that followed was long and complete. What do you want from me? Alcott asked. He sounded exhausted. He sounded like a man who had been pretending for so long that the pretending itself had worn him out. And now that it was over, he didn't know what was left underneath. Not tonight, Ramon said. Tonight I want you to go home. Don't call Castellano. Don't send messages. Don't use your personal phone. Don't contact anyone in your professional orbit. He stood. I'm going to send someone to you tomorrow afternoon. A woman named Claire Sousa. She'll reach out through a channel you'll recognize. When she does, you're going to answer. He picked up his jacket. And Warren, he stopped at the door. Those papers on the table, put them back. Whatever you were going to destroy, leave it intact. He glanced over his shoulder. I told you I don't need it. I don't. But you leaving it there is the first honest thing you'll have done in 6 years, and it matters. He left Alcott sitting in a room full of documents that told the story of his own corruption, under lights that were too bright for the kind of dark they were illuminating. Dante was exactly where Ramon had left him, engine running. Alcott, he said, scared enough to be useful. Ramon leaned back in the seat. Have we heard anything from Shaw? Quiet at the house. Elena woke up around 4:30, asked for water. Maria's still sleeping. A pause. Ramon, Castellano's men, the ones at the cabin, we're going to have to make a decision about them. I know. If we hold them, Castellano will notice. If we release them, we don't release them yet. Ramon pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck, thinking. Not until after we've made contact with the Federal Administrative Channel. Once we have someone in place to receive what we have, we can afford to release them and let Castellano think he still controls the narrative. He looked out the window at the just beginning gray of early morning. There's a window between Castellano thinking he has time and Castellano realizing he doesn't. We need to use that window. And the judge? He'll cooperate. He doesn't have a choice he can live with otherwise. He thought for a moment. What he knows about Castellano's operation from the legal side, the case files, the defendants, the outcomes, that's a map of 6 years of corruption. It's more than we need to bring down the operation. It's enough to burn everything Castellano has built to the ground. Dante pulled the car into a residential street. You realize this goes beyond what we usually touch. Federal territory, judges. This isn't a turf dispute, Ramon. I know what it is. We could walk away. Elena and Maria are safe for now. You put your name on their protection. We don't have to take it further. Castellano will keep looking for a way to close the problem, Ramon said. As long as he's operating, as long as Alcott is protected by him, Elena is never actually safe. She's in a safe house with my guards, and she's still in danger because the source of the danger is still breathing. His voice was even, certain. I don't do things halfway, Dante. You know that. Dante knew that. He didn't argue. There's something else, Dante said after a moment. Ramon looked at him. When I was pulling the building records tonight, the Alderan building, the floors above 14, I found a lease agreement. Goes back 5 years. The tenant is listed as a consulting firm, but the contact name on the lease. He reached into the seat pocket and pulled out a folded paper, handed it across. It's not a name I recognized, but Marco says he's seen it before, in connection with a woman who used to be connected to Castellano years ago. She left the organization and disappeared. Ramon unfolded the paper, looked at the name. He was quiet for a very long time. Dante didn't speak. He understood instinctively that whatever was happening in Ramon's head right now was not something that could be hurried or interrupted. Ramon, he finally said gently, do you know her? Yes, Ramon said. His voice came out strange, stripped of all the control he normally kept over it, a single word landing like something broken. I know her. He folded the paper back up, put it in his inside jacket pocket, over his heart, and pressed his hand flat against it for just a second. Then he straightened up, cleared his face, became himself again. Take me back to the house, he said. Dante took him back. He didn't ask any more questions, but he watched Ramon's face in the rearview mirror for the rest of the drive. And what he saw there, in the set of the jaw, the stillness of the eyes, the way the man seemed to be carrying something new and heavy in his chest, told him that the story had just gotten larger than any of them had understood. And they were nowhere near the end of it. The name on the paper was Sofia Ortega. Ramon had not said her name out loud in 4 years. Not to Dante, not to any man in his organization, not to anyone. He had kept it sealed in a part of himself, the way you keep a wound sealed. Not healed, just contained, managed, pressurized. You learn to function around the missing thing. You learn to not press on it in public. You learn to move through the world as though the shape of you is complete, even when you know, in the private dark of 4 in the morning, that it isn't. His sister had been 26 years old when she disappeared. He had spent 2 years looking for her. Real looking, not the kind where you make calls and wait for calls back, but the kind where you personally retrace every step, personally interview every person, personally sit in rooms with men who fear you, and look them in the eye and ask them what they know. He had found nothing. At the 2-year mark, he had made the decision, the specific, terrible decision, to accept what the evidence seemed to be telling him, which was that Sofia was gone in the permanent sense, and that continuing to look was going to cost him things he could not afford to lose. He had stopped looking. He had never stopped thinking about it, and now her name was on a lease agreement in a building owned by Victor Castellano's brother-in-law, registered to a consulting firm that didn't exist, dated 5 years ago, 1 year before Ramon had stopped looking, which meant she had been alive at least 1 year after he gave up. He sat with that in the back of the car, hand pressed flat against his jacket pocket, and he did not allow himself to feel it fully. Not yet. Feeling it fully would cost him the focus he needed for the next several hours. And the next several hours were going to determine whether Elena and Maria Smith survived the week. He filed Sophia away in the place he always filed things he couldn't afford to feel yet, and he told himself he would come back to it. He always came back to things. That was both his greatest discipline and his most reliable source of pain. He got back to the Linden house at 6:20. Shaw met him at the door. "Quiet all night," Shaw said. "The woman woke up twice. The girl didn't move. Anyone approach the property?" "One car came down the road around 4, slowed at the gate, kept moving. I ran the plates." He held out a phone with a photo. "Registered to a company that doesn't come back clean." Ramon looked at the plate number, looked at the timestamp, 45 minutes after he had confronted Castellano outside the club. Castellano's doing a drive-by, confirming the address. He handed the phone back. "Double the outside. I want 2 men at the gate, 2 at the rear of the property. Nobody approaches the house without my voice on it personally. Understood?" "Understood." He went inside. Elena was awake. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of something warm between her hands, and she had the look of a woman who had not actually slept, who had simply lain in the dark and held her daughter and waited for morning with the grim patience of someone who has learned that waiting is sometimes the only action available. She looked up when Ramon came in. "You were gone all night," she said. "I was." He pulled out a chair across from her and sat down. He was tired, not physically exactly, but tired in the deeper way, the way that accumulates from years of decisions and their consequences. "I went to see Alcott." Her cup stopped moving. "The judge." "He was at the building, trying to destroy documents." He watched her face. "I stopped him." Elena absorbed this. "What does that mean? What happens now?" "It means he understands his situation. He's going to cooperate with the process I'm building." He looked at her steadily. "I need you to understand something, Elena. What you saw 3 weeks ago, it's bigger than one woman in a building. Alcott has been on Castellano's payroll for 6 years. Cases decided, sentences bought, men sent to prison or protected from prison based on whether Castellano paid. Your testimony, combined with the financial documentation we pulled, is enough to dismantle an entire corrupt infrastructure." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm a cleaning woman," she said finally. "I'm not a federal witness. I don't know how any of this works. I don't have a lawyer. I'm going to get you one. Today." He leaned forward slightly. "But I need to ask you something first, and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay. Is there anyone at all, who might have known you were in that building that night? A coworker, a supervisor, someone who saw you go in or come out, anyone who might have connected you to the 14th floor?" Elena thought. He could see her going back through it, reconstructing the night. "My supervisor assigns floors. She would have known I was on 14, but she doesn't know what I saw." "What's her name?" "Patricia Garza." He filed it. "Has she been in contact with you since that night? Anything unusual? Extra questions about your shift? Anything that felt off?" Elena's expression shifted slightly. "She called me 2 days after. Said a tenant had complained about the cleaning on 14. Said I needed to write a report about what I had done that night. Which floors I'd been on. How long?" She paused. "I thought it was normal. It happens sometimes." "Did you write the report?" "Yes, I submitted it through the company portal." Ramon looked at the table for a moment, then up at her. "Who owns the cleaning company, Elena?" She blinked. "I don't. It's a commercial cleaning service. I've worked there 3 years." The name of the company, Alderan Facility Services. The room was completely still. Alderan, the same name as the building. The building owned through Gerald Finch's trust, which meant the cleaning crew assigned to that building was employed by a company that, traced back far enough, belonged to the same network as the building itself. Which meant Elena Smith had not stumbled into that room by accident of circumstance. She'd been placed in that building by an organization that didn't know it was placing her there. A bureaucratic oversight in a corrupt system that had assumed the 14th floor would be empty. And the moment Castellano had realized someone from his own cleaning service had been on that floor that night, he'd asked Patricia Garza for the report. He'd had Elena's name within 48 hours. Elena, Ramon said carefully. Patricia Garza, does she know where you live? Her face went pale. She has my address for HR purposes. Does she know about Maria? About your daughter's school, your routine? She knows I have a daughter. Elena set down her cup. Her hands were shaking. Oh God, It's okay, you're here, you're safe. Maria is... She told them where I live, Elena said. That's how they found me. That's how they knew when to... She pressed both hands flat on the table, steadying herself. Her voice dropped to something fierce and precise. Maria walks to school alone 3 days a week because I start early shift. She has a route. She knows the route. If they had gotten to her before they got to me... They didn't. Ramon's voice was steady, certain. She's in the next room. She's safe. Because I made her run. Elena looked at him, and her eyes were bright with a kind of anger that had nowhere useful to go. I made her run into the dark by herself at night because I had no other option. My 7-year-old daughter ran through a forest alone because I couldn't protect her any other way. Her voice cracked just once, and then she pulled it back. I need this to be over. I need her to be able to go to school and walk home and not have to run from anything. I need my life back. I know, Ramon said. Do you? She looked at him with the directness of someone who has been pushed past the point of politeness. Because I've been in this house for 8 hours and I'm grateful. I am, but I don't know you. I don't know what you want from this. I don't know what it costs me to be in your debt. I don't know. It doesn't cost you anything, he said. That's not how this works. Everything costs something. Not this, he held her gaze. You owe me nothing. That's not what this is. She looked at him for a long time, searching. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find enough of it. She exhaled, picked up her cup again. The shaking had stopped. Okay, she said. What do you need from me? He needed her to write it down. All of it. Everything she saw that night. Every face, every detail. The exact time, the exact floor. The exact words she'd overheard before she backed out of the room. He needed it in her own words, not coached, not shaped by anyone else. Because when this reached the level it was going to reach, the authenticity of her account was going to be the thing that made it unimpeachable. Elena wrote for 2 hours straight at the kitchen table, in the kind of focused, determined silence that told Ramon she had decided to stop being afraid and start being useful. Which was, he reflected, one of the most dangerous things a person could decide to become. Maria woke up at 8. She came down the hallway still half asleep, her pale gold hair loose and tangled, and she stopped when she saw Ramon at the table across from her mother. And she looked at him with a careful assessment he was already beginning to recognize as characteristic. You came back, she said. I said I would. She considered this. Then she went to her mother and climbed into the chair beside her and put her head on Elena's shoulder and watched her mother write. And she didn't ask questions. She just stayed close. That was the thing about Maria. She understood, with the instinct of a child who has had to be more perceptive than her years, when the adults around her needed her to be quiet and present rather than demanding. Ramon went to the window. He called Dante. Patricia Garza, he said, find her. Don't approach, just find her and watch her. If she tries to make contact with Castellano or anyone in his orbit, I want to know immediately. Already pulling her, Dante said. And the lawyer, I have a name. Nadia Reeves. She handles sensitive federal matters. She's not connected to anyone in Castellano's circle, and she owes me a conversation from a situation 3 years ago. Get her here today, this afternoon if possible. Working on it. A pause. Ramon, there's something else. Torres called an hour ago. Something in Dante's tone made Ramon's attention sharpen. What? The men at the cabin. Hector, the big one in the red jacket. He asked to speak with you directly. Torres says he's been agitated since 3 this morning. Nervous in a specific way, not the usual scared. He says he has information. Something he didn't give up last night. What kind of information? He wouldn't say to Torres. He says it's only for you. And Ramon, the pause was careful. He mentioned a name. He wouldn't explain it, just said the name. Said you'd know what it meant. What name? Sophia. The kitchen window was cold against his fingertips. Outside, 2 of his men were visible at the gate, their breath fogging in the morning air. Ordinary, secure, the world going on being the world. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Ramon said. He hung up. He stood at the window for 5 seconds, and in those 5 seconds something moved through him. Not the contained thing he'd been managing since he saw the lease last night, but larger, older, the full unmanaged weight of 4 years of not knowing. Then he turned around. Shaw appeared in the doorway. You have the house until I'm back. If anything moves, anything, you call me before you do anything else. Understood. He looked at Elena. She had stopped writing. She was watching him with the perceptive attention of a woman who has learned to read rooms carefully. Is everything all right? She asked. It will be, he said. Keep writing. The drive to where Torres was holding Castellano's men took 25 minutes, and Ramon spent every one of them thinking about what Hector, knowing Sophia's name, could possibly mean. The configurations were limited. Either Hector had encountered the name in connection with Castellano's operation, which meant Sophia had been connected to Castellano's world in some capacity, or Hector had been told to use the name as leverage, which meant Castellano had anticipated that Ramon might move against him and had prepared this as a pressure point. Neither possibility was comfortable. Both were possible. The location Torres had chosen was a commercial storage facility, one of those anonymous low buildings with roll-up doors, entirely unremarkable from the outside. Torres met Ramon at the entrance, a compact, careful man who communicated primarily through economy of expression. He's been asking for you since 3, Torres said. The others are calm. He's not calm. Has he said anything else? Any other names? Just the one, and he keeps saying he knows something that changes everything. That's his phrase, changes everything. Torres held the door. He looked at me when he said it, Ramon. He wasn't performing. Whatever he has, it's real. Ramon went in. The 5 men were being held separately in adjacent units, not inhumanely given the circumstances, but firmly. Torres opened Hector's door. Hector had clearly not slept. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, and he looked up when the door opened, and when he saw it was Ramon, he got to his feet with a speed that was more relief than threat. I need to talk to you, Hector said. Just you. Ramon looked at Torres. Torres stepped out and closed the door. The 2 men faced each other in the clean, fluorescent space, and Hector, who had looked like a wall of aggression in the cabin last night, looked now like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had finally calculated that putting it down was worth whatever it cost. Sophia Ortega, Hector said, your sister. Ramon said nothing. He waited. She's alive, Hector said. The room made no sound. I've known for 2 years, Hector continued, and his voice had the quality of a confession, rapid, pressurized, the release of something held too long. I was there when Castellano took her, back when, I was lower down then. I didn't have a choice. I told myself I didn't have a choice. She was being held at a property Castellano owns in the north part of the county, a private residence for a long time. He was using her as leverage in case he ever needed something from you. He swallowed hard. 2 years ago, she was moved. I don't know where. Someone inside the operation helped her go. That's what I heard. That she got out with help. But I don't know who helped her or where she is now. Ramon was standing very still, too still, the kind of stillness that in another man might have preceded violence. But in Ramon was something else, the absolute suspension of every external process while the interior machinery ran at maximum. "Why didn't you bring this to me?" he said. His voice was barely above a level murmur. 2 years ago, or any time before tonight. Hector looked at him steadily. "Because I was afraid of what you'd do. To Castellano. To me." The honesty of it landed without softening it. Ramon absorbed it. "The property in the north," he said. "Tell me everything you know about it. Every detail. Address, layout, who ran it, who had access, who was in and out over the years she was there." Hector nodded. He sat back down. He started talking. He talked for 40 minutes. Ramon listened without interrupting, standing in the same spot, without moving, without writing anything down because he didn't need to. He had always had a memory for information that mattered, and this mattered more than anything he had ever heard. When Hector finished, there was quiet. "The person who helped her get out," Ramon said. "You said someone inside the operation. Do you have any idea who?" "No, just a rumor. Someone who got tired of what Castellano was doing. Someone who had access to the property and the resources to move her without being seen." He paused. "There's one thing. The name on the consulting lease in the Aldrin building, the one registered under Sophia's name. That wasn't Castellano's doing. That came after she was moved. Someone set that up for her. Someone who wanted her to have resources, an identity, a way to exist." He met Ramon's eyes. That was someone protecting her. Someone who knew who she was and what she was running from. Ramon thought of the paper in his jacket pocket. Sophia's name on a lease in a building connected to Castellano. Not Castellano's arrangement, someone else's. Someone who knew enough about the building's deeper ownership to use it as a hiding place, hiding in plain sight. The audacity of it, the precision. "She's been here," Ramon said, "in this city, under Castellano's nose. For at least 2 years, maybe more. And Castellano doesn't know." "I don't think so. If he'd known she was here, he would have moved on her by now." Ramon's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Dante. One line. "Castellano is moving. Not to his usual locations. 3 cars, heavy security, we don't know where yet." He looked up at Hector. "The property in the north, is it still operational? Does Castellano still use it?" "I think so. For storage, maybe. I haven't been out there in a year." "Is there anything there he would go to protect? Documents, assets, anything he would want to secure if he felt his operation was collapsing?" Hector thought for only a second. "There's a basement. I was down there once. Castellano keeps physical records. Old school, no digital copies. Of everything. Every arrangement, every payment, every name. He calls it his insurance." He paused. "His insurance against everyone, including Alcott." Ramon was already at the door. "Torres," he called. Torres appeared. "Get me the address of the north property from Hector. Right now." He looked back at Hector one final time. "You did the right thing." Hector didn't look like he felt like he'd done the right thing. He looked like a man who had just finished dismantling something he'd spent years building and was sitting in the rubble trying to figure out if what was on the other side of it was better or worse. But he nodded. Ramon went out into the morning air and called Dante. "Castellano is going to the north property," he said. "He's going for the physical records. If he burns them, we lose the insurance policy that can bring down Alcott. We lose documentation of 6 years of corruption, and we lose whatever else he has in that basement. He was already walking to the car. How far out are we from that address? Give me the location and I'll tell you. I'm getting it now. He looked back at the building, at Torres already coming out with a phone to his ear. Dante, whatever we're doing in the next hour, this is the moment everything either comes together or falls apart. I know, Dante said. Then let's make sure it comes together. He got in the car. And Dante, Sophia is alive. She's somewhere in this city. After this is over, finding her is the only thing that matters to me. There was a pause on the line, a long one. When Dante spoke, his voice was quieter than usual, careful in the way of someone who understands the weight of what they're carrying. We'll find her, Ramon. The car pulled out of the lot. The morning was fully lit now, the kind of cold, clear November light that shows everything without mercy. And somewhere in the city, a man named Victor Castellano was heading toward the last thing he had left that could protect him. And Ramon Ortega was heading there too. They were not going to arrive at the same time. Castellano arrived at the North property 12 minutes before Ramon did. That was enough time. Ramon understood it the moment Dante confirmed it. 12 minutes was enough time for a man who knew exactly where to go and exactly what to burn. 12 minutes was the difference between having everything and having nothing. He told Dante to push the car harder, and he sat forward in his seat with both hands on the back of the headrest in front of him, doing the math, running the angles, calculating whether 12 minutes was survivable. It depended on how fast Castellano moved. It depended on whether panic made him efficient or sloppy. In Ramon's experience, panic made most men sloppy. But Castellano had not built what he'd built by being most men. How many with him? Ramon asked. Torres counted 6 cars leaving the city. He lost 2 of them on the highway interchange but tracked the primary vehicle north. Best estimate, 10 to 15 men. And we have 8, including you and me. Shaw is still at the house. That's enough. He said it because it had to be true. Dante said nothing. The property came up on the left, a long private drive behind a fence line, no signage, no visible activity from the road. But 3 of Castellano's cars were parked at the end of the drive, and the gate was standing open, which meant Castellano had come through fast and hadn't bothered to close it behind him. And that told Ramon everything about the man's state of mind. He was not moving with precision, he was moving with desperation. Good. Pull past the gate, Ramon said. Block the drive with the car. That cuts off our exit too. I know. He looked at Dante. We're not leaving until this is done. They went in. The property's main structure was a large converted farmhouse, and the men Ramon had brought fanned out around it with the practiced efficiency of people who had done similar things in similar places and understood the geometry of the problem. Ramon went straight through the front door, which was unlocked, which was another sign of Castellano's panic. No one had been posted at the entrance. He heard voices from below before he found the stairs. A basement door, standing open. Castellano's voice, tight, clipped, urgent, ordering men to pull files, to bring the boxes up, to get them outside to the burn barrel. Ramon went down the stairs at a pace that was not quite running, but was faster than walking, and he came through the basement doorway into a low-ceilinged room full of filing cabinets and shelving and boxes. And he found Victor Castellano standing in the center of it with 2 men on either side, one open box already in his hands. Castellano looked up. The 2 men with him reached for weapons. I wouldn't, said Marco, who had come in through the back and was standing on the other side of the room with his own weapon already drawn. 2 more of Ramon's men appeared on the stairs behind Ramon. The 2 men with Castellano looked at each other, looked at the math, put their hands up. Castellano set the box down slowly. His face was composed, that infuriating, practiced composure, but his breathing was visible from 10 feet away, his chest rising and falling with a speed his expression was trying to deny. You got here faster than I expected, he said. You moved slower than you should have, Ramon said. Too many cars, too much noise. You should have come alone with one man in 30 minutes. You had enough time for that. He looked at the box Castellano had set down, the files visible inside. But you panicked, and panic makes men bring an army when they should bring a match. Castellano's jaw tightened. Step away from the boxes, Ramon said. This is my property. These are my records. Step away from the boxes, Victor. He stepped away. He didn't have a choice, and they both understood it. Whatever authority had organized itself around him in his club last night, in the familiar territory of his own world, was absent here in this basement with Marco's weapon up and Ramon between him and the door. Ramon walked to the nearest filing cabinet and opened it. Inside, dense, meticulous physical records, payments, dates, case numbers. Alcott's name visible in the first folder he lifted. He closed it again, set it back. Everything in this room, he said to Marco, goes into the cars. Every box, every drawer, every loose paper. Nothing stays. Marco nodded and started directing men. Castellano watched this with the expression of a man watching his own execution and unable to stop it. You have no idea what you're starting, he said. Those records don't just have my name in them, they have yours. They have the names of every man you've ever done business with, every arrangement. I know, Ramon said. Then you know that if those records reach federal investigators, some of them will reach federal investigators, Ramon said. The ones that concern Alcott, the ones that document 6 years of bought verdicts and corrupted prosecutions. He looked at Castellano. The rest will be managed appropriately. Managed? Castellano's voice was cold. And who decides what gets managed? You? Yes. And I'm supposed to trust your judgment about what's appropriate? You don't have to trust anything, Ramon said. You're not part of the next conversation. He turned to the men who had come with Castellano. All of you, out. Up the stairs, out the front door, and stay on the property until someone tells you otherwise. Move. They moved. Nobody argued. Castellano's men had been watching their employer lose ground inch by inch since the moment they'd arrived, and the calculation of loyalty versus survival had been resolving itself steadily in favor of survival for the past 10 minutes. That left Castellano alone in the basement with Ramon. Elena Smith, Ramon said. I want you to say her name. Castellano looked at him with pure contempt. Is that what this is? Say her name. I don't answer to you. She is 34 years old, Ramon said. She cleans office buildings for $12 an hour. She has a 7-year-old daughter who walks to school alone 3 days a week because her mother starts early shift. She opened a door on the wrong floor and she saw 2 men talking, and you decided that her life was worth less than your secret. His voice was still level. It never rose. That was what made it worse. Say her name. Something shifted in Castellano's face. Not remorse. Ramon doubted the man was capable of remorse in any recognizable form, but something that was at least the shape of acknowledgement. The shape of being seen and named by someone who had the power to do something about it. Elena Smith, he said. She is alive, Ramon said. Her daughter is alive, and they will stay that way. You are going to retract whatever standing orders exist for those 2 people. Tonight, in terms that every man in your organization understands clearly. If either of them receives so much as a phone call that makes them uncomfortable, you've made your point, Castellano said flatly. I don't think I have. Ramon took a single step closer. Sofia Ortega. The name changed the air in the room instantly. Castellano's composure, that expensive, practiced, professionally maintained composure, cracked. Just for a second, just a fracture line, visible and real, running through the careful surface of the man. He blinked. His eyes cut left and came back. His hands at his sides moved slightly. That was a long time ago, he said. 4 years ago you had my sister, Ramon said. You held her, used her as insurance against me, and you never told me. Every word landed flat and precise, like a blade being placed on a table rather than thrown. I spent 2 years looking for her, 2 years that I could have spent finding her, and you watched me look from a distance and you said nothing. It was business. It was my sister. The basement had no echo. Everything fell dead in it. Castellano looked at Ramon, and for the first time since they had known each other, Ramon saw something genuine in the man's face. Not guilt, not empathy, but genuine physical fear. The fear of a man who understands, fully and finally, that he has run out of ground. She got out, Castellano said. 2 years ago. Whoever helped her, I don't know who. I didn't order it and I didn't stop it because by then, he stopped. Because by then you needed the peace with me more than you needed the leverage, Ramon said. You let her go because keeping her was becoming a risk. Castellano said nothing, which was confirmation. Where is she? Ramon asked. I don't know, truly. After she was moved, I didn't look. I made a decision not to know. He held Ramon's gaze. I knew if I found her, the situation became complicated again. I preferred not to know. Ramon studied him for a long moment, reading the honesty or absence of it in the man's face, applying everything he knew about Castellano's tells and patterns to the specific quality of what was in his eyes right now. He believed him. He didn't want to, but he did. All right, Ramon said. He turned and started up the stairs. That's it? Castellano said behind him. You just walk away? Ramon stopped on the third step. He didn't turn around. The records from this room are going to a federal contact today. Alcott's arrangement gets exposed, and the people who went to prison or walked free based on his rulings get reviewed. That process is going to take months, and when it concludes, your operation will be under a level of scrutiny it has never experienced. He continued up the stairs. I'm not going to kill you, Victor. I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to make sure that every institutional protection you've ever purchased is gone. And then I'm going to let the system do to you exactly what you've been doing to other people for 20 years. He reached the top of the stairs. That's the walk away. He didn't hear Castellano respond. There was nothing to say. He called Shaw from the drive. Elena and Maria, he said. How are they? Lawyer arrived an hour ago. Nadia Reeves. She and Elena have been in the sitting room for 90 minutes. I can hear them talking, but I'm not close enough to make out the words. A pause. Maria's been sitting outside the door the whole time. She has a book open in her lap, but she's not reading it. She's listening. Of course she was listening. She was 7 years old, and she already understood that the conversations happening in rooms she wasn't allowed into were the ones that determined the shape of her life. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Ramon said. He hung up, looked at Dante. The records from the basement, straight to Claire Souza. She knows what to do with the Alcott material. Everything else, secure storage until I review it personally. And Castellano's men, the ones at the cabin, the ones here, the cabin crew stays until tomorrow. Then Torres releases them with a message. Their employer's protection no longer extends to anything connected to Elena Smith or Maria. They can pass that up the chain. He looked out the window. The men here witnessed nothing criminal today. Let them go. You're being careful about this. I'm being precise about this, Ramon said. There's a difference. Dante drove, and then, after a few minutes of quiet, Sophia. Yes. Where do we start? Ramon reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the folded paper with her name on the lease. He'd been carrying it against his chest for 6 hours. He smoothed it out against his knee and looked at it. The consulting firm on the lease, Souza hasn't touched it yet. It wasn't connected to the Alcott material. I want someone to pull that entity fully. Who set it up? What address it was registered to? What activity it shows? He folded the paper again, carefully. She's been in this city for at least 2 years. She has an identity. She has resources. She has someone who helped her build both. That person is the thread. We find that person, we find Sophia. And if she doesn't want to be found? Dante asked. He said it gently, but he said it because that was his job, to say the things Ramon needed to hear before he needed to hear them. Ramon looked out the window. Then I find her anyway, he said. I tell her I'm sorry for the 2 years I stopped looking, and then I let her decide. He turned the paper over in his hands. She gets to decide. She's never gotten to decide anything in her life because of me, because of who I am. Whatever she wants, I'll make it possible. That's all. He put the paper back in his pocket. That's all I want. Dante nodded, said nothing more. When Ramon walked into the Linden house, Nadia Reeves was in the hallway, putting documents into a briefcase with the brisk certainty of a woman who has just spent 90 minutes establishing the exact dimensions of something enormous and is already 3 moves ahead of it. She looked up when he came in. She's credible, Reeves said without preamble. Her account is specific, consistent, and she has the HR report she submitted through the company portal. She forwarded it to her personal email the day she submitted it, which means we have a time-stamped document placing her on that floor on that date, submitted to a company that traces to the same ownership chain as the building itself. Combined with your financial documentation, she closed the briefcase. This is a viable federal case. How long? Ramon asked. To build it properly? 3 months. To get emergency protective custody established for Elena and Maria through legitimate channels? I can have paperwork filed by tomorrow morning. She looked at him directly. You understand what that means. Once they're in federal protective arrangements, they're no longer under your direct control. I know, Ramon said. That's the point. Reeves studied him for a moment, the look of a woman recalibrating her expectations of a man. All right. She picked up her briefcase. I'll call you tonight. She left. Ramon walked to the sitting room doorway. Elena was sitting on the couch, and Maria was beside her now. They had clearly been in this position for a while. Maria with her head on her mother's shoulder and Elena's arm around her, both of them still, both of them carrying the specific exhaustion of people who have been through something that cannot be undone, but have begun, cautiously, to believe that the worst of it might be behind them. Elena looked up when he came in. Her eyes searched his face, reading it the way she'd been reading it since last night, looking for the shape of what he knew and what he wasn't saying. It's done, he said. Castellano's records are secured. Reeves has your account and the documentation she needs. By tomorrow morning, you'll have legal protection that doesn't depend on me. Elena's breath came out slowly. She held her daughter a little tighter. Patricia Garza? She asked. Dante pulled her this morning. She made contact with Castellano's organization twice after you submitted your HR report. She'll be part of the federal investigation. He looked at her steadily. She won't be able to hurt you. Elena nodded. She looked down at Maria. Baby, she said softly. Maria lifted her head from her mother's shoulder and looked at Ramon. Is it over? She asked. And there it was, the question that a 7-year-old girl had been waiting to ask since she'd run barefoot through a dark forest and thrown herself in front of a convoy of black cars because her mother had told her to run and find someone, anyone, and make them help. She'd found Ramon Ortega. She'd held his gaze without flinching, and she'd told him what she needed, and she'd led him through the fog to her mother's tree, and she had not broken once through any of it. And now she was asking in the small, clear voice of a child who has been holding herself together through will alone, whether she could finally stop. Ramon crouched down to her level. He looked her in the eye. Yes, he said, it's over. Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned back against her mother's side and closed her eyes. And the breath she let out was the sound of a child releasing something she'd been carrying since the night she ran. The held terror, the vigilance, the weight of being the person who ran for help because there was no one else to do it. It left her in one long, slow exhale, and Elena pulled her close and pressed her mouth to the top of her daughter's head. And neither of them said anything, and Ramon stayed in the crouch for one more second and then stood. "I'll have men on the property for another 72 hours, he said, "until Reeves has the federal paperwork in place. After that," he looked at Elena, "you won't see me again." Elena met his eyes. "Is that your preference or mine?" "Yours," he said. "Whatever you want that to mean." She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. Not quickly, not performatively, but with the real consideration of a woman who respects the weight of what she's being asked. "I want Maria to grow up somewhere that the word safe is boring," she finally said. "Completely boring. I want it to be the most unremarkable thing in her life." "Then that's what you'll have," he said. He walked to the door. He stopped. "For what it's worth," Elena said behind him, "I didn't know who you were when Maria stopped your car. I didn't know if you were good or bad or something in between. I just knew she was standing in the road and she wasn't moving and she was asking for help." She paused. She made the right call. Ramon turned and looked at her one last time. "So did you," he said, "when you made her run." He left the house. Outside, the November cold had held all day and wasn't letting up. The kind of cold that settles into a place and means it. Dante was at the car. The gate was secure. 2 men were at their posts. Ordinary, solid, holding. He put his hand in his jacket pocket and felt the folded paper there. Sophia's name, Elise, 2 years of her living quietly in a city he moved through every day without knowing she was in it. Somewhere out there, his sister had built a small, anonymous life and hidden inside it, and she had done it well enough that even the men looking for her had missed her. That took strength. That took exactly the kind of strength he should have known she had, because she had always had it. He had just failed, for 2 terrible years, to keep looking. He was done failing that. He got in the car. "Start with the consulting firm," he said to Dante. "Pull everything." Dante started the car. And Ramon Ortega, who had built an empire on the premise that power was the only thing that could protect the people who had none, settled back in his seat with Sophia's name pressed against his chest. And for the first time in 4 years, he allowed himself something he had not permitted. Not hope exactly, because hope was too fragile a word for what he carried, but certainty. The certainty of a man who has decided, without reservation, without the possibility of turning back, that the thing he is going to do next is the most important thing he has ever done. Not the power, not the empire, not the machinery of fear and control he had spent 20 years constructing. This, finding her, bringing her home, or bringing himself to wherever home was for her now. He had protected a woman and her daughter from the worst night of their lives, and in doing so had pulled on a thread that led back to the worst night of his own. That was how it worked sometimes. You go to save someone else and find the piece of yourself you had declared lost. Maria had stopped his car in the dark because she had no other option, and she had taken the chance anyway. He was going to take his. Some promises were made once, in a specific moment, and then lived out over years in 10,000 small decisions and 1 or 2 very large ones. Ramon had made his a long time ago. Protect the defenseless, deliver justice to those who believe they are untouchable, and never, not once, look away from someone who needs you just because looking is hard. He had not always kept it perfectly, but he had never stopped trying, and he was not done yet.